So the last thing I'll discuss today is, does David Benavidez fighting on Tank's undercard kill the Canelo fight? So there are people saying how because he's fighting on Gervonta Davis undercard, it shows that he's not a draw and he doesn't deserve to fight against Canelo. And they're saying he's been demoted or he's taken a step backwards. I'm not gonna sit there and get into it at this moment, but I will address it. But the one thing I do is one thing I want to do is show you something that David Benavidez said, and then I want to address that, and then I'll talk about whether or not David Benavidez fighting on Tank's undercard is proof that he has nothing to offer Canelo and that it kills the Canelo fight. So first, let me share this video and discuss what was said. All right, so first thing I want to do is let's pause this. All right, bring it back. All right, let's listen to this.
You know, if I talk so much shit, come shut me up. You're getting a good paycheck for it. You come fucking shut me up.
Yeah.
But, you know, for the simple fact he's asking for 150, 200 million, like, come on, bro. Like, that's – and he continues to say I'm not worth anything. It's funny that you're going to ask $200 million for a fighter who's not worth anything. You know what I mean? So take me out of the equation. There's not – him asking for that amount is not realistic in any way. So, I mean, I really do think he's scared of me. But I know that there's no man that could face me, that could beat me in this world. Yeah. And I'm 100% confident in that. So, you know, if I talk so much shit, don't shut me up.
So what we're going to do right now is discuss those comments. So check this out. David Benavidez says, why is he asking for $200 to $150 million if I'm not worth anything? And that it means he must be worth something. And that's not necessarily true. If you understand how business works, someone has to take a loss. So if they got to pay Canelo a lot of money to fight David Benavidez and the fight doesn't sell well or doesn't generate a certain amount of money, someone's going to take a loss, right? How many people are going to be willing to invest in a David Benavidez fight when he's fighting on an undercard right now because his last two pay-per-view fights have been bad? And the hit you take, as I explained before, when you have bad pay-per-view numbers is that only a select few people actually saw the actual fight and got to hear the actual story. So, for example, when he fought Demetrius Andrade, David Benavidez, they ran a story about his family. I thought it was a dope story because it explained how he's in boxing, his brother's in boxing, how they had some difficult times as a family, but their bond got them through it and they stayed together. And it's dope. I'm able to connect with Benavidez on like the fan, but getting to know him as a person level. But when he only does 60,000 in pay-per-view buys, that means only 60,000 people actually watch that story. Most of the people who know what he did to Demetrius Andrade saw it in a 30-second chopped up clip on Twitter or somewhere else, or they saw the highlights. But when you see the highlights, you don't get to get that connection. You don't get the Benavidez story. You don't get to see him out there with his dad and his brother and his family and his kids. You don't get the story. You don't get to get that personal connection with David Benavidez. And the same happened with his fight with Caleb Plant. It didn't really do great numbers, so you didn't really get that connection. But if they were able to get David Benavidez had that same fight against Demetrius Andrade on Showtime, I think close to a million, or maybe even more than a million people would have watched it for free if it was free on Showtime. And then you got a million people who get to see his story, who get to identify with him as a person, as the individual. And then that's when people become fans. Remember, storylines are important. That's what keeps the WWE in business. That's what keeps the UFC in business. Storylines, people getting to relate to the fighter. People like, I like this person. I vibe with this person. I feel like I relate to this person. That's what drives the sales. That's what drives interest in the fighter. Look at the Devin Haney fanboys. Look at the Gervonta Tank Davis fanboys, right? Look at the Canelo fanboys. What they all have in common is they identify and relate to the fighter. But Benavidez doesn't have any fanboys because he hasn't really had his story out in front of people, in front of a large enough audience. But to the diehards who watch boxing, you see him and you're like, yo, this brother's really talented. He's the guy we think would ice Canelo. Well, guess what? He's not going to get the opportunity to ice Canelo when people don't know who he is, because Canelo means too much to the sport of boxing. So business-wise, if you're Canelo and they're like, fight this dude Benavidez, I keep telling you, everything's risk reward at the end of the day. He's thinking, yo, Benavidez is a really good fighter, but I can generate the same amount of revenue fighting Munguia, who's a good fighter, but not as much as a risk as David Benavidez. And for everyone saying, oh, if he fought Benavidez, it would do better numbers than Munguia, prove it without using speculation. Prove it using facts. Prove it using, show me the numbers, right? Show me the money, show me the numbers, not your opinion. You think because everyone wants to see the fight, it's going to do well. Everyone wanted to see Errol Spence fight Terrence Crawford, and that fight did the same amount of pay-per-view numbers as Canelo fighting Jamal Charlo. But let you tell it in your speculation, everyone wanted to see that fight. I keep trying to tell people, you don't represent everyone. Because you want to see that fight doesn't mean everyone wants to see that fight. Just because you want to see Canelo fight David Benavidez doesn't mean that it'll sell 1 million. Doesn't mean that it'll sell well. Doesn't mean that the risk is in line, or the reward is in line with the risk. So people can say, oh, that's a punk move. Oh, what happened to doing it for the love of the sport? The love of the sport goes out the window at a certain level. Canelo's past that level. The love of the sport, you do that when you're in the amateurs. The love of the sport, you do that when you fight in the Olympics. The love of the sport, you do that to get the contract to set your family up for life. And when you're in the tail end of your career, when you're at the absolute end of your career, it's not about doing it for the love and doing it for the sport. Benavidez is in the doing it. Benavidez need to take the risk. Benavidez is in his 20s. Canelo's in his 30s. Canelo been a pro since he was 15. Canelo's on the way out. He don't need to do it for the love of the sport. He's already a first ballot Hall of Famer. If Benavidez stopped fighting today and Canelo Alvarez stopped fighting today, Canelo Alvarez is a first ballot Hall of Famer. There's no debating that. David Benavidez, champion twice in the same weight class, lost his belt on the scales and lost his belt to, substance issues. You think he's a first ballot Hall of Famer? Do you even think Benavidez is a Hall of Famer? You got to take your bias and your hatred for someone out of it. Just like when Floyd was in there, Floyd could call the shots because Floyd was the dude. Floyd's that guy. Canelo's that guy now. Like it, love it, it doesn't matter. It is what it is. And Canelo sells more than David Benavidez fighting Jamel Charlo. He sells more than David Benavidez did in his last 2 fights combined fighting Jamel Charlo. A fight everyone said they didn't want to see, yet it sold more than the fights people said they want to see. And that's the problem in boxing. You say you want to see Terrence Crawford fight Errol Spence, and when they fight, it doesn't even break 1 million buys. You say you a Benavidez fan. You say the world is behind Benavidez and the world wants to see Benavidez fight. Well, if the world wanted to see Benavidez fight, why can't he sell more than 60,000 pay-per-view buys? If the world wants to see Benavidez fight, why is he fighting on Gervonta Tank Davis undercard? These are questions that you really have to answer. Do you think the guy fighting Canelo should be fighting on someone's undercard? The only way Benavidez should be fighting on someone's undercard is if he was fighting on Canelo's undercard, and that was because the purpose of him fighting on Canelo's undercard was to announce that he and Canelo had a deal signed to fight each other next. That's the only way he should be fighting on the undercard. Munguia's not fighting on undercards. Even Edgar Berlanga's not fighting on undercards anymore. But we have David Benavidez fighting on an undercard. And to wrap it around full circle, you know why he's fighting on the Gervonta Tank Davis undercard? To promote David Benavidez. They have David Benavidez fighting on Gervonta Tank Davis undercard because what we do know is Gervonta is going to sell. Gervonta is going to rake in the fans. Gervonta is going to get eyeballs on his fight. Gervonta Davis versus Frank Martin is a damn good fight. The people are going to watch that fight. And that's when, let's say that fight gets about 800,000 to 1 million people to watch it, right? They're going to run David Benavidez's story to get him exposure to more people so that more people can relate to him, more people can like him. And that's what it's about. So they're going to do that, and hopefully that's going to help improve David Benavidez's fan base and hopefully get him some more fanboys. Because at this point, David Benavidez doesn't have fans. He has people who don't like Canelo. And the people who don't like Canelo, they hop on bandwagon to bandwagon until someone beats him. But that don't necessarily mean that they're a fan. Your fan watches you. Your fan pays for you. Your fan is about you. So they got him fighting on Tank's undercard to help get him the exposure. But the reality is, if they didn't force him on pay-per-view too early, he would have already gotten the exposure. Because I do think if he would have fought Caleb Plant on regular TV, on regular cable, if he would have fought on Showtime, and he would have fought Demetrius Andrade on Showtime, I think he would have done well. And I think he would have shown that there's interest in him. He could have at least showed the numbers like, look, when I fought Caleb Plant on Showtime, we peaked at 800,000 views. When I fought Demetrius Andrade on Showtime, we peaked at 1 million views. So now you got numbers to show people are actually interested in you. When you go to pay-per-view too soon and only 60,000 people buy your pay-per-view, not only is it a financial hit, but it also doesn't show that people are interested in you. It actually shows the opposite. And that's where he's at right now, David Benavidez. So does David Benavidez fighting on Tank's undercard kill the Canelo fight? To answer the main question, I don't think it kills the fight, but it doesn't help the prospect of seeing that fight this year. To me, I feel like it's going to get pushed back because David Benavidez is going to have an impressive performance in front of everyone, and then somehow show. You can't make the argument that everyone tuned in to watch the pay-per-view because of you when Gervonta's on it. Any numbers that get done on that fight is going strictly to Gervonta. Everyone's going to say, if that fight does over 1 million, everyone's going to say Gervonta does over 1 million again. They're not going to take a survey and be like, well, 500,000 of those people tuned in to watch David Benavidez. They're not going to do that. And he's not going to be able to take that co-main numbers to Canelo and be like, see what I did? Canelo's going to be like, yeah, buddy, Tank did 1 million without you. So does it kill the fight? No. But do I think it delays the prospect of the fight? Yes. So in closing, that's why Canelo is out saying he wants 200 million, 150 million to fight David Benavidez. What he's really doing is saying, Turkey Al-Sheikh, if you want to negotiate a deal with me to fight David Benavidez, I'm willing to talk to you. That's his way of doing it. He's not saying it because you're worth something, David Benavidez. He's saying it because there's a man out there who's been described as boxing sugar daddy who is putting on some amazing cards we thought we'd never see. I never thought I'd see Joseph Parker, Deontay Wilder on the same card as Anthony Joshua, on the same card as Daniel Dubois and Jarrell Big Baby Miller. So there's that guy who he's talking to. That's the only guy he's talking to. Has nothing to do with your value, David Benavidez. He doesn't care. In fact, your value showing. Your value is co-main to the main. Like, you're not even a real pimp. You're an assistant pimp. Okay? You're supposed to co-sign everything Gervonta Tank Davis is saying. David Benavidez. And I know the David Benavidez fanboys are going to get at me. I'm just telling the truth, man. You know what I mean? It is what it is, though. Let me know what you think in the comment sections. Like, share, leave a comment. I'm out. Peace.